When you think of the Battle of Britain, you probably get this very specific, heroic image in your head, right? It's this incredible story of defiance and courage, a moment that completely changed the Second World War. But what if the story we all think we know is only part of the picture? Okay, let's get into it.
And of course, there are those famous words from Winston Churchill. They've defined the battle forever. It paints this picture of a small group of pilots, the few, who saved an entire nation all by themselves. And that quote, it pretty much became the bedrock of the legend. Yeah, and this is the scene that's burned into our collective memory. Brave young pilots in their Spitfires and Hurricanes just tearing across the sky in these wild dogfights against a huge German Air Force. It's an incredibly powerful, almost cinematic vision of victory. But was it really that simple? Was this massive, world-changing victory all down to the guts and skill of those pilots alone? Or were there maybe other things going on, invisible forces that helped tip the scales? Well, it turns out there was. The RAF had a secret weapon, a total ace up its sleeve. It was a revolutionary system that, honestly, was probably its most powerful weapon, and it was one the Germans just completely failed to understand. It was called the Doubting System. And what was it? Well, it was basically the world's first integrated air defense network. See, it wasn't just about the planes. It was a whole system that brought together brand new radar technology, observers on the ground, and command centers, all into one single, unified weapon. So here's how this incredible machine actually worked. First, radar stations would spot German planes forming up over France. That info was shot over to a central filter room where people plotted the enemy's speed and direction. From there, the info went to command headquarters, who then radioed their pilots and told them exactly where to go to meet the enemy. It basically turned total chaos into a perfectly choreographed dance of death. And the result of all this? The numbers are just staggering. I mean, before the war, if even half your fighters found the enemy, a 50% interception rate, that was considered amazing. With the Doubting system, that number jumped to an average of 90%. 90! It was a total game changer. And hey, don't just take my word for it. Churchill himself said later that all the skill and bravery of the pilots would have been for nothing without this incredible system backing them up. It was the brain that guided the brawn. So this focus on systems and information, it led to something else. A huge, and I mean huge, advantage for the British. A completely different approach to military intelligence. Just take a look at how differently the two sides were set up. The RAF's intelligence unit was independent. They brought in brilliant outside experts, civilians, and they shared information like it was their job, because it was. But the Luftwaffe, their intelligence guys were seen as low status, stuck under the command of operations. Information was power, something to be hoarded, not shared.
And this really bad approach, it came from the very top. The whole Nazi system was built on rivalry and making commanders compete with each other. This meant that intelligence officers would often just tell their bosses, like the head of the Luftwaffe, Hermann Göring, exactly what they wanted to hear. They would, garnish their reports, twisting the facts to make them sound better, which created a totally warped view of reality.
And what does all this bad info lead to? Well, a complete disaster for the Luftwaffe. They never, ever understood how important the Doubting system was. They were constantly convinced they were doing way more damage to the RAF than they actually were. And the biggest mistake of all? This bad intelligence led them to switch their main target from RAF airfields to bombing London. That gave Fighter Command the breathing room it desperately needed to repair, rearm, and get back in the fight.
But the story isn't just about secret systems and bad intelligence. There was another group of the few who all too often get left out of the legend completely.
So after France fell, thousands of Polish pilots made their way to Britain. These were guys who had already fought the Germans twice. But at first, the RAF was frankly pretty dismissive. They'd kind of bought into the German propaganda that the Polish Air Force was useless and had been wiped out in just a few days. Man, they could not have been more wrong. Once the Poles were finally allowed to fly, the 303 Squadron went on an absolute tear. Get this, in just 42 days, they shot down 126 German planes. That made them the single most successful fighter command unit in the entire Battle of Britain. And again, the man in charge, Hugh Dowding, said it best. He stated flat out that without the Poles and their incredible skill, he wasn't sure if the outcome of the battle would have been the same. Think about that. Their contribution was absolutely decisive.
So, okay, we've got the system, the intelligence failures,
the international pilots. But lately, some historians have started asking an even bigger, more fundamental question about the battle itself.
What if, and this is a big what if, even if the RAF had lost the battle in the air, a German invasion of Britain was never actually going to happen anyway?
This is the argument from military historian Andrew Gordon. He literally calls the classic story hogwash. He says the real thing stopping the Germans wasn't the RAF at all, it was the massive power of the Royal Navy. In his view, there was just no way a German invasion fleet could have even survived crossing the English Channel.
But a lot of other historians, like Bill Bond, fire right back. And his point is this. What about the Luftwaffe's dive bombers? Without the RAF flying cover, those Stukas would have just blasted the Royal Navy's big, slow ships right out of the water, leaving the coast wide open for invasion. It's a classic historical debate, and it's still going on today.
Which leaves us with this final question. So who really gets the credit for winning the Battle of Britain? Was it the heroic pilots in the sky, the forgotten Polish aces, the brilliant planners behind that secret system, or was it the quiet power of the Royal Navy? The truth, as it so often is probably that it was a little bit of all of them. History is just never a simple story.